Welcome to this week's edition of the Belau Report. We have Carla Nelson. We are lucky to have her this week. She had a day off and we took advantage of her. Thank you very much for coming. And what's your big issue this week?
Well, it's great to be here with you, Jane. Well, I'll tell you, I'm a little sad about something that was very close to passing earlier this week on Monday, and it died 33 votes to 34. It was a very common sense provision which would have brought oversight to the billions of dollars of grants that we use, of taxpayer dollars that we send out to different organizations. And the amendment that I tried to add, which I thought would be accepted, bipartisan. We're already doing this over in the Health and Human Services bill. We require that before grant money can be given to an entity in HHS, the commissioner needs to determine, well, what are the goals of this grant? What is it that we want to see done? And then what are the metrics? How are we going to measure if it's successful? And then, of course, there needs to be a report afterwards to see, well, what did happen? Did we get the results that we anticipated? Were there negative unintended consequences? So my amendment took that very same language that's already been signed into law for Health and Human Services and applied it when the Jobs Omnibus Bill came to the floor earlier this week. Basically, just saying that any grant over $500,000, before that can be awarded, the commissioner has to determine, well, what's the goal? What are the metrics? What is it that we want to see? How are we going to measure it? And then at the end, there has to be a report so we know, how did it work? Did it work? And amazingly enough, that common sense provision that are in other parts of the law, already signed into law for Health and Human Services, was rejected when it came to DEED, Department of Economic Development and Employment. And I was rather shocked because, you know, we should never be on this list. But the Certified Fraud Protection Entity, which is a global group, lists every year, its year-end report, the top 5 issues of fraud in the nation and globally. And in the 22 report, I'm sad to say Minnesota was on that list. Top fraud. And of course, that fraud was the Feeding Our Futures fraud. And you don't have to have a very long memory to realize that we've had other massive fraud in Minnesota. You can think of the nearly $10 million of Medicaid fraud, which we didn't even find, but the feds noticed it. And that was a problem here in Minnesota. And then you'll think about the child care fraud that we had. So we have had so much fraud in our state, and we need to be getting on the front end of this, and we need to start doing a better job of itemizing what it is that we want to see with taxpayer dollars, determining those metrics, and then we should expect a report at the end to see how it worked. I think that would go a long way to preventing fraud in the future. So I was really disappointed that that really common sense, good government amendment failed. It failed on a vote of 33 to 34 in the Senate.
Is that dead now?
Well, we've got the same 67 senators voting the rest of the session, so the only reason, the way it would pass is if somebody changed their mind. It died on a straight party line vote. So it would take one of the senators who voted no. I'd gladly bring it up again, but it would take somebody to change their vote. One, just one. It only needs one more person to change. One of those DFL senators would need to change.
Wow. Well, okay, what else? Your pension bill passed?
The pension bill is just getting rolled out of the Pension Commission. I serve on the Pension Commission. On Monday, we did a walkthrough of what that omnibus pension bill looks like. There's a provision in there specifically from the Rochester experience with the Rochester Fire Department. One of the things that we found is that our pensions are not exactly fair in how they treat firefighters depending on where they started their service. If they started serving in Rochester and they moved on to a fire investigator or a fire chief or a deputy chief, they could be part of what's called the fire pension, the para police and fire pension. However, if they didn't start in Rochester and they started maybe in northern Iowa, which happened here, and then they moved to Rochester, suddenly if they were a battalion chief or something, they could not participate in that fire, a para police and fire pension. So we actually had to change the law on that. It was really a disincentive to recruit people, to get new people to come in because they weren't eligible for the pension that others in the same position that they were, but started in Rochester, would be eligible for. So that bill was brought forward by Rochester Fire. And the chief was very helpful in that. It's been well supported through para and all the way through. And I'm hopeful that that will pass as part of our pensions bill. And it is in the omnibus bill.
That's good. All right.
It should help with recruiting.
Okay, education.
Oh, education is pretty interesting. You know, last year, well, you know, I'm a former teacher, big supporter. I know we need to have strong public schools. And last year, you might recall that there was the massive education funding, historic education funding, even though we had fewer students, more funding. But what happened is our school districts are still in financial straits, just like we saw with the Rochester School District. As you know, there were so many mandates put on schools about things they must do, and they were unfunded mandates, that I have spreadsheets from the school districts and Senate District 24 that show that even with this additional new funding, but all these items that were added in unfunded, some of them, well, all of them are having financial trouble as a result of that. But some went so far to tell me, well, you know what, this means we're going to have to lose so many teachers so that we can pay for all these unfunded mandates. And the challenging thing about that is the majority of those unfunded mandates, the most expensive ones, they weren't even in the education bill. They were tucked away over in the labor bill. So that's been a problem for our school districts. So one of the things that I tried to add onto, we did have the education omnibus policy bill a few days ago, and I just tried to add a little flexibility onto that so that our school districts could have a 3-year window in which to look at how best to implement those unfunded mandates. Or they could choose to prioritize which ones were going to be implemented when. And as you know, education funding comes in many different buckets, and you can't fund something out of a bucket that it's not eligible to be funded for. And so the amendment that I had would have given our school districts just a little bit of flexibility, a little breathing room, so they could be flexible in how they used the funding, and they could be flexible in prioritizing how to implement those unfunded mandates or not for up to 3 years. And again, even that common sense bill that would have provided some much needed flexibility to our school districts as they struggle with the finances because of all these unfunded mandates, that also was voted down on a straight party line. 33 yeses and 34 noes. So that amendment was voted down as well.
Why is that a party line issue?
Well, that's a really good question, Jane. I didn't think either that amendment or the grant oversight amendment should be party line issues. They should be just good government issues. So that is hard to see when you see that 33-34 number, and whatever is the 33 doesn't pass, but the 34 does. Or if you're voting for something, 34 noes if they didn't like it. And unfortunately, in the case of those amendments that I mentioned to you, both of those were good government amendments. They should not have been partisan. We've done something similar before for some education mandate relief. When I was a freshman, we passed a little bill regarding some special ed mandate flexibility. I'm shocked that, you know, these things are dying on a party line vote. That's too bad. We hope things change, and it's not going to continue to be that way throughout all session. We just don't get our best government when everything is just straight up or down party line votes.
Okay, how about healthcare?
Well, there's a lot of things moving in healthcare. Some I'm going to tell you about I think are very positive and have some great opportunities to help with our workforce crisis. We have a workforce crisis everywhere, but particularly in healthcare. Nurses, for example, dentists, dental hygienists. And so the more modern way of licensing these health professions is called through compacts. And we have several compacts already. Several years ago, we passed the Physicians Compact. That was my legislation that allows a doctor who's licensed in other states, has passed the national boards, all of these type of tests, can also practice in Minnesota or other states that are part of the compact, where they all have the same high quality regulations, teaching, preparation. And so we should be doing that for nurses as well. In fact, now there are 41 states that allow their nurses to belong to the Nurse Licensure Compact. So if you've passed the training, the practicum, all of the teaching, all of the boards, and you have that, then you can practice in any state that is part of the compact, 40 other states. And you don't have to go through the licensing in that particular state because you're part of the compact. And unfortunately, Minnesota has continued to reject the Nurse Licensure Compact.
Really?
Yes, I'm very much hoping, actually, interestingly enough, Kim Norton, who was the House member, when I was a freshman in the Senate, we carried the Nurse Licensure Compact. She was the House author, Democrat. I was the Senate author, Republican. And it got through both bodies, and Governor Dayton put a kibosh on it. And since that time, there was not 40 states, now there's 41 states that are part of this Nurse Licensure Compact. And the Board of Nursing, the Minnesota Board of Nursing, it is one of their top priorities, because if you think about what happened, not just during the pandemic, but with all of the travel nurses, they have had to issue so many licenses. It's just amazing that they have been able to get through that huge backlog, where we should be like the other 41 states. And if these nurses are qualified for all of the compact, all the things that we require in Minnesota, then they should be able to get a nurse licensure, a compact license. But
and you have a bill for
yeah,
that?
I have a bill for that. I've had it for a number of years now. I'm not giving up until we pass that. It's important for our nurses. We should not be denying our nurses. 80% of the nurses have said they want to have this Nurse Licensure Compact. The Department of Defense wants it. The military wants it. The University of Minnesota nurse educators want this. The Board of Nursing wants this. There's only one opposition in the past years, and that has been the Minnesota Nurses Association has been opposed.
And they don't even have a majority.
No, Mayo Clinic has more nurses than MNA does throughout the state. Only about 20% of the nurses in the state belong to the Minnesota Nurses Association. So, and the Board of Nursing, every nurse that has a license was asked on a survey, did they support the Nurse Licensure Compact? And certainly vast majority would like to be part of that. So that's a piece I'm hoping will move forward this year. Now, we're also doing other compacts this year that are moving forward, and I'm hoping the nurse licensure will be one of them. One that's moving forward also came from Rochester, from our dentists, and that is the Dental and the Dental Hygienist Compact. In fact, we have such a shortage of dental hygienists that our dentists aren't even able to work at their maximum capacity because they can't get enough dental hygienists. Right here at RCTC, I've spoken with President Boyd, and they have to turn away. They can't even bring in as many students into the dental hygienist training as they want to come, because there just aren't enough training spots for them. So the Dental and Dental Hygienist Compact is, again, one of these more modern ways to license health licenses. In this case, it's dentists and dental hygienists who have gone through all the requirements of the state of Minnesota, of the compact states, of the training, licenses that are not encumbered or any way, no nicks for poor behavior or anything like that, clean licenses. We should join the other states who are participating in the dental and the dental hygienist compact. This has been worked out with the Council of State Governments. As I said, the Department of Defense supports this, the military supports this, the Minnesota Dental Association supports this, the Association of Dental Occupations supports this, the hygienists support this, and so I've had several hearings on this bill, and I'm hopeful that we will continue to see that progress through the legislature. I think we will. And so there's been a lot of work to, again, allow our medical professions to participate in this more modern way of licensing, which is a licensure specific for their occupation that other states have all agreed upon.
That would be an answer to the first responders crisis in the rural areas. It would be an answer for our senior citizens who are institutionalized.
Could be very helpful.
If you could get that going.
Yes, I'm hoping. We do have several compacts already. We have, as I said, the medical compact for physicians, speech language compact. We've passed a few every year. I've passed many of them, were bills of mine. And we have many other legislators who are also very interested in this more modern way of licensure. And I do want to give a shout out to Senator Liz Bolden, who is a co-sponsor on my dental and my dental hygienist compact bill. I'd love her support on the nurse licensure compact bill too, because that would pass the legislature. We just need one more Democrat to support the nurse licensure compact. All the 33 Republicans, I believe, support that, but we just need a couple more votes.
How about this bill that criticized the CEOs of not-for-profit organizations like Mayo and wouldn't let them have whatever salary that the institution that they had establishes for them?
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical, quite frankly, of government telling medicine what to do. And I mean, we live right here, right in the shadow of the world's best healthcare. People travel from around the globe, and when they don't have answers, they come to Mayo Clinic. Just about everyone I've talked to, when they find out I'm from Rochester, they say, oh, Mayo Clinic saved my uncle so-and-so's life or so-and-so's life, or they came. So, I'm just saying, we do not want to reduce our high quality healthcare because somebody thinks that someone else should be running what salary remuneration is. I think that is not part of government's role.
Well, is there a bill?
Well, there is probably a bill that someone has written to try to hold salaries at some government allowed level. I mean, that is kind of, unfortunately, a little bit of the environment that we're in right now, where there seems to be a lot of more confidence in government regulations than in letting consumers decide or letting businesses either succeed or fail based upon how they meet consumer expectations. So right now it seems to be there's a lot more emphasis on trying to have government regulations, which I'm not a huge fan. I think certainly the government is not the best regulator.
Okay. Did we finish education?
Well, there's more to come on education issues. We just talked about some of those policy pieces of education. Because of the large amount of expensive unfunded mandates passed last year, as I said, mostly in the labor bill, there's a number of bills circulating for additional funding for K-12 education. I think that's going to be a little bit difficult because it's not a budget session. And as you might recall, I'm sure Minnesotans recall, we entered that 2023 with a 19 billion with a B, a dollar surplus, and then $1.5 billion was shoveled off to make sure that government was on automatic inflation, and then the other 17.5 billion was spent on a variety of things, and of course so much was spent that there was $10 billion of tax increases as well last year. So if you just kind of look at all of that, it makes one think there's not going to be a significant spend in this non-budget year. I don't believe there will be. The governor has released his budget targets. The House and Senate, both also Democrat controlled, and the governor have released their global targets, and it is under $1 billion. So there's not a lot of funding, I don't think, for additional relief, even though our schools are in tough shape with a number of these unfunded mandates that, you know, sounded good. Earned safe and sick time, paid family medical leave, but the way they were rolled out was not a way that could be implemented very well, and is very costly the way it was rolled out. It is a very one-size-fits-all.
Okay. All right, what else?
Well, you know, it is a bonding year. I do sit on the Capital Investment Committee as well, of course, and that is where the funds, that's kind of, you know, the odd years, or when the budget is set for the next 2-year biennial budget. That's what happened last year. This even year, 2024, then the even years are traditionally the bonding years, although there was a large bonding bill passed last year. I think there will be some bonding proposals, I hope so, that are passed this year. I'm really laser focused on really what I think are those rightful roles of bonding, which are, you know, safe roads, bridges, clean water, the government infrastructure. Those type of things would be very important. Of course, safety is key. You might recall last year my proposal for the Highway 14 and 44 intersection passed, so that intersection is being made a full intersection now and safe. But when you think about the traffic that continues on through that intersection as it heads west, County 3 and County 5 are also being impacted. So I have a bonding proposal to start the process of making both 3 and 5 safe as well, intersections 3 and 5 there along Highway 14. So that is very important. I'm also carrying a proposal that I think I like to get kind of double duty for dollars, particularly taxpayer dollars. And the Rochester International Airport, which you know is an economic engine for the whole southern tier of the state and beyond, and as well, of course, many medical life-saving things there as well. But a couple things needed there. There's a proposal to use some covered parking. I mean, if you think about trying to push wheelchairs through a snow-covered parking lot, that's a little bit problem in our neck of the woods here. And so there's a proposal for some covered parking, but it's not just covered parking. That cover of the parking are actually solar panels, so generating energy, which then reduces almost to nothing the need for the terminal. So it almost provides all the energy for the terminals, what's expected. So it's got some really, I think, good pieces in there. And then, of course, as you know, the federal government is helpful too in some of these proposals. And I do like, if we are going to put in Minnesota dollars, I think it's important that we bring in some federal dollars as well, so that we can stretch our money further. And oftentimes that happens with transportation, whether it be the Highway 14 projects I was telling you about. Those were some state dollars and some federal dollars. And also the projects we've done at the airport have brought in significant federal funding too. So those are some of the things that I think are really important. And I also like some innovative things as well. The Olmsted County Waste to Energy Plant is looking at food waste. You know, food waste is the largest part of our waste stream right now. And they've been able to find a way to have that food digested in a way, like in a digester, and then sell it. So there's a market then to buy that food waste that's been turned into usable products. You might think about fertilizer, for example, and those type of things. So those are a few of the things that are on the horizon that I think are really important as well.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left. So what issues do you want to bring up?
Well, there is I think there's a couple troubling trends that are a little worrisome. One seems to be the troubling trend where what should be legislatively determined, like a new flag or a new state seal, those type of things I think really belong at the legislature, people who have election certificates. So their constituents, in a sense, are represented. And if they don't like what that senator or House member did, they can vote him out at the next election. But what's happened last year, remember, there was a unelected governor-appointed committee that determined, well, this is what the new flag should look like, or this is what the state seal should look like. And it's going to happen. There was no vote on it that the legislature or elected people had to stand up and say, oh, this is a good idea, I support this, or no, I don't. So I think that's a problem when you're putting things to committee. And they've done that before as well for a committee that's looking at healthcare, government buy-in for healthcare, as far as Medicare buy-in for everyone or Medicaid buy-in for everyone for healthcare. Again, I think that's really problematic when you have an unelected, unappointed body kind of pulling together these ideas, and then they come to the legislature and sometimes they have a vote and sometimes they don't, like the flag and the state seal. They'll just happen. So I think that's a troubling trend when you're taking important decisions away from people with election certificates that are accountable to their constituents. I think that's a problem. Then another problem, there seems to be another troubling trend that I'm noticing this year more than last year, is this idea about misclassification of workers. So suddenly there's kind of this, you've heard about painters, for example. Painters now need to, according to one piece of legislation working through the legislature, they have to be regulated by the state and they have to be licensed. And so this kind of over-regulation, I think, is a problem. And then, as I mentioned, on the misclassification of workers, there's been a number of bills about saying, well, we can't have these independent contractors anymore. Everybody needs to be a W-2 employee and needs to enter into the labor pool in that way, when in reality, we have a lot of independent contractors, whether they be painters or somebody that you called to mow your lawn, or your insurance advisor. I mean, a number of people who, in fact, half the workforce actually is independent contractors nationally. And I don't know that we have to turn them, I don't know why someone thinks we have to try and turn them all into W-2 employees. And that would, by doing that, of course, they would fall under all kinds of labor laws that maybe those individuals really aren't interested in. So I think that's kind of an expansion of government regulation that causes me great pause, great concern.
It increases what government tells the private sector what to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Jane. That does seem to be kind of like a common thread, that government knows best and government should regulate more. I don't think government has that great of a track history, actually. You know, the thing with private business, if they don't produce what a customer wants at the quality they want and at the price that they want, or if they can't get the employees they need to do the work, they go out of business. Government just, doesn't. We're still here, and we're all, and we should be, don't get me wrong, I'm not an anti-government person, but I do think we should trust our private businesses that are accountable to consumers and how consumers, they vote with their wallets, much more so than government. So I'm a little bit concerned about kind of the over-regulation of government. Painters is one of those examples, the move to now regulate painters.
I think that we are at the end of our 30 minutes. Do you want to say anything to the audience that will relate to the end of this month?
Sure. Well, I just want to thank your listeners, Jane. I thank you for putting this forward. Just know that the legislature is required by our Constitution to adjourn on May 20th this year. It's the third Monday in May, and that's May 20th. That date was written when our state became stated, when we wrote our Constitution. So it's over 160 years old that we've known about that date. So we'll be adjourning, and it's called adjourning sine die, and that means that we adjourn without a time certain of coming back, because as you know, there will be an election for the House members coming up in November, and then the legislature will be back in session in January. As always, when we're in session, especially in a session that was so prone to spend so much money, I always think of Mark Twain and his quip, which is, no man's life, liberty, or property is safe when the legislature is in session. So I would say hang on, stay informed, reach out to me, sen.carla.nelson@senate.mn, and it's a joy and a privilege to serve you.
Senator Carla Nelson, thank you for taking this time in the middle of the last quarter of the session to bring us up to date, and we'll look forward to one more interview at the end that tells us what happened.
Well, thank you, Jane. That will be here before you know it. It's always a joy to be here, and it's always just great to be in my district at home here.
Okay, thank you, our viewers, for your interest in our Minnesota government and our state and our federal government and our world. And we'll be back again next week, same time, same channel. In the meantime, have a very good week and a very good night.